The only collection more impressive than Jay Leno's garage full of automotive mastery might be the Peterson Automotive Museum, but does every car belong there? Jay Leno at one point had the reputation as one of the hardest working comedians around. Even when he was doing his nightly spot on The Tonight Show, he was still doing stand-up shows, and what little off time he had, he's taken the money from his relentless work ethic and invested it in an impressive collection that spans the history of the automobile, as well as its future. With an impressive roster, it's hard for some parts of the collection to measure up. Let's see why. The Ecojet might be the best example of what kind of collection Jay Leno has. A check for a limited production supercar made out of rocks from Mars or some other almost pointlessly exotic material, as a flex for their massive bank accounts and disdain for subtlety.
You made a car with a jet engine.
But if you're really special, you can draw your dream car on a napkin and have General Motors make your own custom-built concept car. Leno was looking to relive the 50s and 60s car design obsession with the jet age with his own turbine engine future car. So he drew that on a napkin and handed it over to General Motors. The result is a modified Corvette Z06 frame with a 650 horsepower Honeywell LT101 turbine engine mounted in the middle. Sharp-eyed viewers might notice that turbine engines are neither clean nor efficient. What makes the jet eco? First, it runs on biodiesel, that fuel from renewables that your hippie friends keep telling you about. It was also one of the first cars to use the vegan leather alternative Alcantara that now adorns most high-end supercars these days. Even the paint was subject to a special production process to reduce emissions. If you're wondering why this 2006 creation didn't lead to a world of jet engine eco cars, that's because ultimately, it's kind of a bad idea that people worked really hard to make into a semi-workable one. But it's also the best example of the kind of cars only a collector like Jay Leno would have.
It would have been way cooler if flames came out the back of the car, I'm just saying.
Well, yeah, I'm not trying to scare children. We're trying to make a transportation vehicle here.
The Ecojet not exotic enough? Then try on the Blastoline. The Ecojet isn't the only car in the collection with an engine meant for other things. In fact, he has a whole collection of pre-war race cars powered by airplane engines. There's one car in the collection that's special in its cross-platform power plant, the tank engine Blastoline. This was the creation of two automotive artists that aren't concerned with your regular hot rod conventions: Santa Cruz, California's Michael Leeds and Randy Grubb of Grants Pass, Oregon. The two of them came across someone with a collection of tank engines and literally set up camp in the garage until they built a hot rod around one of the tank engines, giving birth to both the Blastoline Special and the loose collective of builders known as the Blastoline Brotherhood. These are not custom shops that build to spec hot rods, but artists who assemble one-of-a-kind cars answerable only to their own muse, primarily by collecting the detritus of over 100 years of all manner of vehicles. Even though they don't build to order, they somehow knew that their first creation would end up in Leno's garage, as it's another perfect example of the kind of unique car that makes his collection so enviable. The 1906 Stanley Steamer Vanderbilt Cup Racer represents the kind of history that Leno's collection preserves. Carl Benz's gas-powered invention was barely a year old before the first race was organized. By 1906, publications were sponsoring town-to-town races for this new invention, the automobile. Members of the Cape May Automobile Club, Charles J. Swain and John Wilkes Jr., commissioned the Stanley brothers to make a special racing version of their steam-powered cars for the Vanderbilt Cup to prove that steam was the way to go. Unfortunately, one of the brothers fell ill, and the other had summer plans, and the cars weren't made in time for the 1906 Vanderbilt Cup, even though Swain and Wilkes had already bragged to all their friends and the press that they were totally gonna run the race in a Stanley steamer. The steam-powered racer found its way into Leno's collection, where it joins other steam-powered cars that hope to become the dominant engine of the new-fangled automobile. The Ecojet wasn't the first time that someone shoved a turbine engine in a car to see if it worked. Chrysler even made a go at a production-ready turbine car. And of course, Jay Leno has one. When Chrysler made its turbine car, they actually had people send in letters to explain why they should get one and agreed to keep a log of their experience. It's not that car wasn't smooth, it was. It performed on par with the company's 318, and with highway mileage reaching 19 miles per gallon with a hard decline once you're in the city. The main sticking point was that it cost twice as much as its piston-driven brethren. In the end, Chrysler couldn't even give them away. Being a scant 3 years old when they finally gave up, they weren't old enough for auto museums. Most were crushed. Only two made it into private hands, including the one that Leno bought directly from Chrysler, right around the time they were bought by Daimler-Benz. Leno has said if he had a favorite, he wouldn't have a collection, but that the first car he'd save in a fire is his McLaren F1. Let's just say this one up front. The top speed war between hypercars is ridiculous. The current record holder at a verified 2-pass top speed run, the SS Tuatara, managed its average of 282.9 miles per hour on a 3-mile-long airstrip in Florida. Bugatti's 300-plus mile-an-hour car can only achieve those lofty heights at their test track under adult supervision. Meanwhile, any sense of usability is sacrificed at the altar of speed you'll never see. Even race cars don't bother with 300-plus miles an hour, unless you get there in less than 4 seconds and a quarter mile. These cars are engineering bragging rights funded by big-money buyers to live in air-conditioned garage until they're auctioned off to the next air-conditioned garage. The car that arguably started the top speed wars was the first offering from racing manufacturer McLaren. Gordon Murray and team principal Ron Dennis wanted to celebrate their Formula One triumphs with a clean-sheet supercar design. The result was a sleek supercar with an F1-style center driving position and a normally aspirated V12 from BMW that drove the car to an astounding, at the time, 234 miles per hour. It was an expression of passion from an innovative race car designer who once attached a fan to the engine of a Brabham F1 car to help suck it to the ground. It was the perfect expression of automotive passion from a genius designer. McLaren wouldn't go on to make production sports cars until 2010, after both Gordon and Dennis were gone. This is the kind of labor of love that belongs in a collection like car lover Jay Leno. The McLaren isn't the only result of a legendary racing team being given a blank slate to create something ridiculous. There's also the 1950 Mercedes Transporter. Mercedes' current domination of Formula One is not the first time that the Silver Arrows have been a world-beating team. In the 50s, they also dominated sports car racing with their fast and beautiful 300 SL cars. With a car that iconic, you can't just show up with a regular truck and trailer combination. It lacks class and distinction. So the engineers were given a blank slate to build a transporter around the 300 SL's engine. The result was a sleek-looking transporter that also happened to be capable of speeds north of 100 miles per hour. Don't want to be late to the races.
You take this to a Mercedes meet and people go crazy. They just think it's the coolest looking thing.
Leno's collection also features some pieces of American racing history, like the 1953 Cunningham C3. Cunningham had elevated the American special game of building cars with American V8s with the salvage bits of European race cars with special bodies. Coming from a wealthy family, the America's Cup-winning Cunningham went beyond the garage Frankensteins that were taking on the world to his own creations that took on the world. Their white with blue stripes paint jobs became the symbol of American race cars racing abroad. Leno's C3 features an Italian-crafted body that hides a 331 Hemi on a house-built chassis. 25 examples were made, so that Cunningham met the requirement to be a manufacturer and enter a C5 in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Then there are the cars that just don't belong in the collection. The Koenigsegg CCXR Trevita is everything that the McLaren F1 it gets the Trevita designation from. Its triple white carbon titanium body that's so difficult to make Koenigsegg stop at 2 instead of the planned 3. It's the epitome of the modern hypercar, complete with goofy doors and manufactured scarcity. Christian Koenigsegg delivered the car to Leno in person, not because Leno needed such a garish car, but because Koenigsegg needed Leno to have one.
To meet the guy whose name is on the car, and it's so fascinating to me.
The other one was in the collection of fellow celebrity collector Floyd Money Mayweather. It's not historic, it's not a feat of engineering. It's the kind of car you get to prove you can, and doesn't really belong in such an otherwise well-curated collection. Mazda has built a reputation as a brand for enthusiasts, mostly around their MX-5 Roadster and their rotary-powered RX flagship cars, including the RX in Leno's collection. The RX was the return of the Wankel power cars to American shores, after mileage and exhaust issues took its gorgeous RX-7 progenitor off the market. Used RX-8s have become an excellent bargain for people looking for big excitement for little money, but it's hard to understand why a mass-produced daily driver deserves a place in Leno's collection of rarities.
It's almost like they had a styling suggestion box at the factory. They got millions of ideas and then said, I know, let's have all of them.
Leno has always been interested in the future of the automobile, including electrics, dating back to the beginning of the automobile, so it makes sense that he would have an early example of the Model S. That was when the Model S was a huge gamble. Now Tesla accounts for 75% of the electric car market and is one of the highest valued car companies by share. Musk still heads straight to San Fernando Valley to have Leno give his stamp of approval to his latest creations, including Leno setting a quarter-mile record in the new Model S Plaid Edition. At this point, Musk can sell his own cars. It's not that the Tesla isn't significant. They've single-handedly changed the automotive landscape, with Tesla now pumping out north of 200,000 Model S's per year. It's just a car that many of Leno's friends use as a daily driver. Of course, if we wanted to pick and choose cars for a collection, we're free to go and make our own. It would just take decades and an iconic late-night show, and a near non-stop road shows to achieve a collection as massive as Leno's. That shouldn't be too much trouble, right?